Welcome back to Tip Radio. I'm Michelle McLean, your host, and today we're very honored to welcome a true leader, veteran advocate, and civic change maker, Captain Morgan Little, US and retired. He has dedicated his life to service, leadership, and making sure veterans have a voice. From his military career to his work in civic engagement and veteran voting rights, he has shown extraordinary courage, persistence, and commitment to community impact. It is a very warm welcome to you, Captain Little.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Well, you have accolades that just go beyond. I've had the wonderful honor of speaking to you a few times, and I must say, you received meaningful recognition for your leadership, advocacy, and service. But what does this mean to you personally to be recognized not only for your military service, but also for your work that you've done after service to support veterans and civic participation?
One thing for retirees, it's a good thing to be kept off the street and out of pool halls, if you know what I mean. So doing something besides playing pool or bowling or whatever, that's what we're working on and trying to do something functional and useful to as many as we can. And veterans have a lot to work on. So there's a lot to do.
But I mean, you have a very unique perspective on military life. So, can you explain for our listeners the difference between enlisted service and commissioned service? And how does that play such an important role in the strength of our armed forces?
Invariably, there are considerably more enlisted folks than there are commissioned. And one of the reasons is that there's a lot of work that has to be done, and the enlisted folks get to do an awful lot of that work. The paper pushing and that kind of thing is generally reserved for officers, and we get to play with all that business. But the enlisted folks are the ones that do the hard, heavy lifting and the work, heavy work.
So Captain Little, when you say that about the service people doing the hard lifting work, what has your experience been over the years in terms of that?
I had an executive officer on the ship that was just incredible. He and I were on watch together in Combat Information Center when we were at Condition 2 on the ship. And that meant we were able to fire gunfire support for folks in the Army and the Marine Corps. But he had an attitude about this, and he said, Morgan, if you're standing and you're watching and you're supervising activity, if you bend over and pick up a piece of trash, a line and hand it to somebody, a tool and hand it to somebody, you're being distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot be supervising and monitoring what's going on for the safety of your troops if you're distracted by doing something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so keep your hands not in your pockets, but just keep them away from handling tools. And that's not your job. Your job is to be supervising and to watch and see and watch. And when he said watch, I mean watch over these troops so nothing happens to them and there's not an accident going on. So that was the big deal. And he was very clear about that. And he repeated it several times. It finally stuck.
This leads me to the next question. So, your time in uniform, right? How did that shape you as a leader today? What lessons from the military have stayed with you eternally, and what you impart to other wonderful people that want to follow in your footsteps?
Frankly, I think I learned a lot from that very incident that we're just talking about was
Mhm.
when you're managing something or supervising something, continue in that role. Don't get distracted and pick up tools or trash or lines or hoses or anything else. Stand by and watch and see because you can watch over the troops going and what's going on. It paid off my final fit rep on the ship had served an entire Westpac deployment without a personnel or material casualty. And that to me was a real big point because both of my immediate predecessors had each lost an anchor from the ship. And the skippers were not happy.
They lost the
Pay
anchor?
attention.
How does that even
They lost
happen?
anchors. Well, anchor chains get old and they are chains and they can rust and they rust through and all of this and links break and
Okay.
on and on and on. And it was exactly one of those things that a link broke in both cases. It's the anchor.
Was it
And
at one occasion? Was it on one, different crew? I would call it cruise. How do you call it? A mission where it
well,
happened twice?
it was it, it happened on the same deployment.
Deployment.
Both of them happened on one deployment out of Pearl to Westpac. Okay. And the first one lost one, and the skipper was torqued. I mean, he was not a happy camper. And they replaced the then first lieutenant. And be darned if just not too terribly long later, the new first lieutenant lost another anchor too. And it was just a whole list of tight jaws on the skipper's part. You know, he was not happy about losing an anchor.
Well, it's so
It's
interesting
a
to hear
very,
your experiences. One can only imagine. I was very fortunate in Fort Lauderdale. Actually, yeah, Fort Lauderdale, I went onto one of the Navy ships that had just come back from the Middle East. And wow, what an experience. It's overwhelming though. I mean, the hospital facilities, the catering facilities, the crew is so looked after. It is absolutely amazing. It's like a city on water. So I was very,
what, what
pleased to
kind of,
experience that.
what kind of ship were you on?
It was
Were
one
you
of
on a carrier?
the carrier. Yes, yes.
Because when you said hospital facilities and cooking facilities and all that, you're right. They are city size. There are 5,000 people on those big carriers. And
Absolutely
they're
amazing.
serving
Hmm.
basically 4 meals a day because the ships have 24-hour watch schedule and somebody has to be on watch in that ship every minute it's at sea. Every minute. And that
I would
means
hope so.
when it
I would
goes from being,
bloody well hope
yeah,
so.
yeah, no, absolutely. Some of the big merchant folks don't have to do that, but there's a skeleton crew around, and presumably there's human eyes on everything going on those merchant ships, and for certain there are lookouts, and all the watches are manned on the Navy ship. That's for sure. So,
Well, I could only just imagine a little book, little page out of your book of a day or a week experience with you. But we could talk about that forever. But I wanted to really ask you a very important question. We've had a few discussions about this. One of the areas you've been very deeply passionate about is encouraging veterans to vote and making sure their voices are heard. So, why is veteran participation in elections so important?
this is in part absolutely personal. Both of my parents were teachers, and one was a social studies teacher, and voting is a hot button in social studies.
Hmm.
And that, as I grew up, I said, when can I vote? When can I vote? No, you'd have to be 21 to be able to vote. And then it went down to 18 and on and on and on. And that's all fine and good. But veterans get easily forgotten because they've got thousands of other things they have to be doing and paying attention to. We had a meeting when we first started this. I had invited the Texas director of elections down to talk to the Austin Military Service Coalition. Now, this was another collection. They had, oh, maybe 30,000 members in Austin of the coalition. And that meant that the VFW had a bunch, the Legion had a bunch, the Purple Heart had a bunch. And so with that, that's how and where we got that up to 30K members. But the point was, this gent stood up in the back of the room and he raised his hand, and the speaker, who was the director of elections, said, "Go ahead." And he talked and he asked and he said, "I hope you find something that's better than what we had in World War II." We were at quarters one morning and the word came down that we were to pack a ditty bag, and oh, you better take a uniform, so because you may be gone a couple of weeks and you may want to have something to change to from one day to the other. And he said, we went on and we packed and we left. When we came back, 2 or 3 weeks had gone to 6 or 8 months.
Wow.
An election was over by the time we got back, and we hadn't seen anything about our ballot, our vote, or anything else. Now, this gent stood up and he was wearing a CBI patch on his jacket, which is China, Burma, India. That was flying over the hump in Southeast Asia. Highly contested area, very rough lights, high terrain, and it was just the kinds of places you don't want to be flying. Quite frankly, it was over a lot of mountains and in a big stress area. But he was a lucky guy. He had been flying there, and he came home. But he came home and he had that CBI patch on, and that's what that told us, is that we knew where he'd been, we knew what he'd been doing, and we knew why. The problem was the United States mail in World War II could not keep track of him and where he was going and what he was doing and how and where and when and why. And that right now has been changed because we've gone to an email system, and every sailor, every seaman Timmy out there can go to a terminal, download his ballot in minutes, and fill it in. The instant he puts a mark on it, and it could be just a scratch marker, it could be an erroneous mark. The instant there's a mark on that ballot, it becomes a classified document. And when it becomes a classified document, then it goes into the 2 envelopes that Texas wants it to be sent in. And it then heads back to the county seat that he lives in. And then it's got good hope of being counted when it gets back home. There's a 5 grade grace period here in Texas. We tried to get 10, but we had one county that just pitched a fit over it. And they said, no, we can't handle it. We got too many jurisdictions we have to count. And so there was no 10-day grace period, but we did get a 5-day grace period after election day.
Mm-hmm.
So election day comes and goes, and then for the next 5 days, ballots can still be coming in from across or around the world to these guys, to the county seat, to be able to be counted. And so they're likely to get counted that way.
So how did you when you were not in service anymore, that's when you went back to the drawing board and you spoke about this voting ballot situation. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And then
We
how did you solve this situation in recent years after that experience you had?
Well, what we had happen was there was a Marine Corps colonel in the Marine Reserve, and he had just been overseas, and he came back home, and he knew I was involved with it, and he called me and he said, "We've got to fix this thing."
Mm-hmm.
And so we started working on it right then and there. And when it was all said and done, it involved 8, maybe 10 different bills to get through the Texas legislature to fix
How
it.
long did that take?
About 11 years. It's not a
Wow.
snap your fingers. No, it did. We started at about 2004, I think it was. and we got it finished about 2015. So it was an 11-year proposition with a whole bunch of bills, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of players.
Mm-hmm.
The lady in San Antonio, and I'm sorry I can't think of her name, but she was the voting clerk for uh, San Antonio area, Military City, USA. And
Mm-hmm.
she was a whale of a lot of help in helping us know how to fix it, what we do, when, where, what. And so we had a couple of years of experiments, and we tried this and we tried that and we tried the other things. And we eventually got it and said it. I have to tell you that when we started all of this, there were three people in Texas that said, no, we ain't never going to let you guys send ballots to anyone. And that was the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker of the Texas House. All of them united said, no way, Jose, are you ever going to be able to send an unmarked ballot to them by email. And we testified when the bills came up, and those folks were in the room. Their representatives were in the room. And we'd get up and talk about this thing. And that was where and when and why we started our familiarity with the League of Women Voters, because the League of Women Voters treats all of this stuff like it is. It's public information who's running for office. That's not anything like classified. It's public information what jobs are open. That's not anything like classified. You know that somebody in the county is evacuating or executing or
Mm-hmm.
leaving a job, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
somebody else is coming on wanting to have that job. All of that's public information. And why can't it be said?
Are you talking now about the League of Women, the
That's
League
right.
of Women Voters?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. They are. In general,
Mm-hmm.
they do a special session for almost every election in the major cities of Texas. And I've seen those sections that they do in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., here, there, and there. And I think it's a nationwide project that they do, that they
Mm-hmm.
go state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction to gather up all of that information, put it together in a special section in the newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
and they will put that out a week, say, or something like that, ahead of election day.
So
And so that that
how,
information,
how did you make that partnership work?
we
Did you
talk to
approach them
them.
personally?
Well, we use their data. They've been doing this thing for years, and
Mm-hmm.
we just seized on it to wait a minute, Governor, wait a minute, Lieutenant Governor. These ladies are out there doing this.
Uh-huh.
It's not classified information until Seaman Timmy puts a pencil mark or a pen mark on that ballot.
Right.
Until that time, this is all public information, and it's published in the newspapers, for crying out loud.
And then
So
at that time, you got pushback, didn't you, from the governor's office?
you did.
So
We sure did.
how important was that collaboration with the Women's League that you were able to address this? And how did that, maybe just spell that out? How did that actually,
Well,
when the governor's office really resisted to the process?
they all started with resistance. Every one of them, all three of those guys. Okay, they said no way. And when it came time to go, we'd been talking to their staffers that were with them with us in the hearings that were working for the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker. And we could see and we knew that this stuff was going on from the League of Women Voters, and making those points that look, you've got what you're doing in the newspaper there, you've got a list of jobs that are open on one hand, and on the other hand, you got a list of candidates for that job. And your job, Seaman Timmy, is to choose one of those candidates to go in that slot on that piece of paper that has your name on it as a ballot. and then send that back to San Marcos, which is the county seat of Hays County, and then it goes. And that you're right, we got pushback big time, and we just persisted, and we got it done, and they were open minded. That's the good news is they were open minded and listened to us, and we said to it, look, this is what we're doing. And there's sometimes in some places that those double envelopes get picked up and carried back by UPS, FedEx, or some of them will
Mm-hmm.
give a hand helping the mail get these ballots back. But the ballot itself
Mm-hmm.
goes into a first envelope. The voter must sign across the seal of that envelope and put that envelope in an outer envelope that has the address of the county seat for the ballot to go back to.
That is very interesting information. I mean, you know that I'm very new to the United States. I am a citizen. I'm very proud to be an American citizen. And thank you for your service, for making the world a more peaceful and better place. No, I mean, it just is phenomenal, your legacy that you've left behind. There must have been situations that have been very discouraging for you. What kept you going in those moments of pushing through with the voters and the Women's League? And, just it's inspiring. Just what kept you going?
There's Calvin Coolidge has a favorite paragraph on persistence. And that's become the watchword of my life is persistence. And it works. It really does work. And people get tired of you doing it, but they will end up, oh, that's what you're working on. Yeah, well, okay. Well, I see what you're talking about now. Then then it goes away and they said, oh, okay. So yeah. But Coolidge's words were persistence pays, and I couldn't possibly agree more. So
So,
I'm likely to be the most persistent person you're ever going to know.
well, I will second that from looking at the volume of work and everything that you've achieved in your life. And I'm just wondering, what is the IOTP nomination and celebration of you mean to you in the bigger, broad spectrum of your life? Having achieved so much, pushed through, being persistent, what does IOTP really mean for you?
I'm blown away by it, frankly. I'm very honored and I'm very grateful. And that's about all I can say. I just don't quite know what else to say. I think very seriously, but it's a big deal. And I'm glad and I'm honored. I'm really, truly honored. So,
Well, we are very honored to
country
have
boy
you.
makes good.
We are very extremely honored to have you, and your wisdom as well. And talking about your wisdom, there was one story that you relayed to me that I would love for our listeners and our members of IOTP to really get an understanding behind it. So, you have been a captain in the Navy. You are now referred to as US and retired captain. But
Right.
the important thing here is there are many situations which the general public, civilians don't know about. There was one particular issue that you had to deal with in your time was there was a chemical spill in Italy, and the US Navy had to go in and save the situation. Tell us a little bit about that.
In the late 80s, there was a isocyanate, I think is the chemical. I'm not really versed well on chemistry, but it was 400,000 gallons or something like that got loose, and about 3,700, 3,800 people were killed, right? Bang, like that. And
Shocking.
the
That is
Navy,
absolutely shocking.
the Navy said, wait a minute, folks, we've got to be some places sometimes where some of these kinds of things may happen. And what they did, The Navy and the Department of Defense put together and designed and built a chemical and biological decontamination module. They put that module at the Naval Air Station in Sigonella, Sicily. Sicily is a very good spot for that because it's almost bullseye for everything in the Mediterranean basin. It is almost dead center for anything in and around the Med. This piece of gear was 21 million. It has a lockdown capability that is controlled by a single switch. That'll keep people from outside coming in through the doors. It's got revetments so that ambulances can drive up and deliver victims to the station, the decontamination station. The walls and the floors are covered with epoxy so that the walls and the floors don't inhale or absorb any poisonous chemicals and these kinds of things. And this piece of gear is sitting underneath the hospital at the Naval Air Station in Sigonella, Sicily. It is a big deal. This is, frankly, I think the best way to characterize it. This is a gift from the citizens of the United States to residents of the Mediterranean basin because it's right in their backyard being in Sicily. And that means all sides.
Mm.
And we just have to be there and make it operate. And the Navy's got the bubble on this thing. The Marines have one place in chemical warfare. The Army has a job, the Air Force has a job, the Navy has a job. And
Right.
these are all, the executive agent is an Army Major General in the Chemical Corps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He's the man that decides a whole whale of a lot of this on the defense basis. And Major General Frio came to a session we had at the Navy lab in Washington, D.C. And this was his chance to meet our people from the reserve unit. Well, I had a command of one. There was another one in California, San Jose, I think. There were two on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time General Frio had ever seen or heard that we had anything like this.
Right.
And he had his executive assistant came with him to the session. And the session had been going on for 30, 45 minutes. And we had originally planned for him to have about 45 minutes. We didn't know how much he wanted to talk, how long if he wanted to take questions or not. We didn't know any of that. And about 30 minutes in, his executive assistant came over and he said, Captain, is there any way you can extend this for General Friel to be able to continue? He likes the questions and he's blown away by the level of the questions that they're having.
Mm.
And he just wants to continue. He doesn't want to shut anyone off and let them have a conversation with him
Yeah.
if they want to. And so he said, he's the man. Let him have the time. Tell him when. You decide. It's up to him. It really is up to him. However
And
long he wants to stay, he
and
may stay.
and how long was this whole campaign that you went through?
We were actively involved between the early October of 1993 and we turned it back over to them. We'd, as the admiral at the chief of naval research said, find out about this thing.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work? If it works, tell us this, all that. Learn about it turn it on, see if it works, instruct the hospital staff about it so they know what it is, because the staff at the hospital was not real happy when they found out that their spouses could not come be decontaminated or be held in the stowage area where all of these, because the staff of the hospital was going to be locked down,
So was this for a couple
i.e.,
of years or a couple of months?
we were able to store about 30 to 45 people between 30 and 45 days.
Okay,
And
okay.
so
I
it could
was
be,
imagining months and months of this campaign, but you contained it within
it
a couple of
could
days.
be, it was a typical 40, 30, 35 day lockdown,
Okay,
but it could
okay.
be recycled, if you know what I'm saying. We go through
Yeah.
all the whole resanitation again
Well,
and clean it up and do it again.
you know, Captain Little, it's so phenomenal to hear these stories as a civilian. I would be here all day chatting to you. I'm sure there's so many other stories, but how do our esteemed IOTP members and listeners on this podcast get hold of you if they want to hear more about what you've experienced? And it's just inspirational.
It Email is absolutely the best way to contact me, and that's captainlittle@gmail.com. And so, and that's the Navy spelling CAPT little. So, but yeah,
Yes.
I'll
Well, we'll be
do
sure
what
to
I
get
can
all
do.
our
This is
listeners to reach out to you to hear more about you. And maybe just on a last sort of question, a personal note. You have got such an entrenched life in service, doing good with, making sure that veterans have a voice, that Women's League have a voice. But what do you do in your spare time? What do you do for fun?
I am studying Texas history. Once upon a time, when I was in high school, the high school announced that they were going to introduce Latin, and we were going to have Latin 1
Yeah.
before we graduated. My class graduated. And oh, by the way, yeah, I wanted to take typing too, because I could see that computers were going to be a problem, and I'd have to know how to handle the keyboard, if you know what I mean. And remember, I told you my mom was a teacher, right? Social studies.
Hmm.
Well, she engineered this. And I said, I want to take Latin, I want to take typing. And she said, okay, here's what we're going to do. In Texas, you must take American history as a junior in high school. You got it as an eighth grader,
Uh-huh.
but you get it repeated again as a junior in high school. In Texas, you must take Texas history and civics as a senior. And
Mhm.
the reason for that is so that high school graduates have a clue about how to vote and what they have to do and property taxes and all of that kind of stuff that adults have to attend to.
Yeah, right.
And I said, okay, I want to do that. I want to take that. And I was taking a full load. Okay. I mean, and I wasn't taking typing, all that kind of stuff, but I wanted to learn to type.
Mhm.
And it got engineered, and I got to be able to take Texas history and civics by exam. I got to be able to take American history in the junior year by exam. And so then I had Texas history and civics out of the way, and I had American history out of the way. And since then, I've been studying Texas history. I've now found 29 of the forts that there were. I've been
Okay.
to about a dozen of the missions that there are in
Yeah.
around Texas. I've been to all of the presidios, but San Antonio's got a new problem. San Antonio just discovered that the footmarks of a presidio are just across the street from the Alamo in downtown San Antonio. And what that means is all of that high rise downtown San Antonio a city is built on top of what was this Presidio for the Alamo. And it's going to be really interesting to watch and see what the city of San Antonio does with all of this stuff. Because right now, all they've got are the outlines of the buildings and where they were and this and that and the other. And they've
I mean,
just done that with sonar.
that is
Yeah.
incredible. So you spend your time immersing yourself in history and you just keep learning and keep going. I would love to chat more to you, Captain Little, but unfortunately, we've run out of time with our podcast. But I will engage with you
Okay.
again, hopefully at our next soiree or gala event with IAOTP. And then hopefully our listeners and our other members can get to meet with you and have a really in-depth discussion. And I thank you for today. And we celebrate you as IAOTP and a wonderful, esteemed honoree. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. Again, thank you.
Thank you, and have a
My
lovely
privilege.
evening.